The secrets of the small town are no longer staying hidden. Powerful cultivators are making their moves, ancient treasures are being claimed, and invisible forces are beginning to tear apart the rules that have protected this place for generations. While Chen Ping'an remains unaware of the danger closing in around him, Jingchun senses that something far greater is beginning to awaken. Then, a mysterious girl dressed in black arrives carrying a blade, commanding a flying sword, and possessing a killing intent fierce enough to challenge even the strongest figures in town. The balance is breaking, and once it does, there may be no turning back. Welcome to Asterisk Sword Comes, Episode 3. If Xianxia Mountain were not so desperately short on resources, if it did not urgently need a sufficiently weighty immortal treasure to suppress the sex-leaking fortune, and if she herself did not need such a treasure to secure her position as Mountain Master Cai Jinjian, would have wanted nothing more than to leave this place at once, return to Xianxia Mountain, and enter seclusion for 10 or 20 years. Cai Jinjian walked toward Fu Nanhua and the maid standing in the alley. Behind her, the boy asked, "You didn't do anything to me, did you?" Without looking back, Cai Jinjian said, "Boy, you're thinking too much." The boy fell silent. Cai Jinjian glanced over her shoulder with a smile. "At most, you'll be dead within half a year." The boy froze. She laughed charmingly. "You really are easy to fool. Big sister was only teasing you." Chen Ping'an grinned. At almost the same moment, Cai Jinjian and Fu Nanhua, this pair of young immortals from the mountains, had the same thought. A frog at the bottom of a well, an ant beneath the mountain. Song Jixin was crouched atop the court wall, watching the spectacle. He rubbed his temples with both hands, and for once there was a rare trace of genuine emotion on his face. Jigui had already led that strangely tempered woman away to find the little pest Gu Kan, while the young man who threw money around at the slightest disagreement had already entered Song Jixin's courtyard. Yet Song Jixin, sharp-minded as ever, remained perched there in a daze. In his line of sight, the thin boy stood alone in the middle of Mud Bottle Alley. He watched the tall woman's departing back for a moment, then quickly withdrew his gaze and walked toward his own courtyard gate. But for a long time, the bamboo gate did not open. Song Jixin hated this feeling. Some people ordinarily showed neither mountain nor water, so unremarkable that no one paid them any attention. Yet at certain moments they were like a stone lodged in a cesspit. Leave it where it was and it offended the eye. Move it and you dirtied your hands. So much so that Song Jixin did not even hear what Fu Nanhua said behind him. The young lord of Old Dragon City had no choice but to repeat himself. "Song Jixin, do you know there are people in this world who are completely different from all of you?" Song Jixin finally came back to himself. He turned around while remaining seated on the wall and looked down at the elegant young man in his tall crown and brocade robes. "I know." Fu Nanhua had to swallow the grand explanation already on the tip of his tongue. Still unwilling to let it go, he smiled and asked, "You truly know?" The mysterious youth of the small town gave him a cold look and sneered. "You mean people who can bring the dead back to life, restore flesh to bare bones, live for centuries without aging, and wield boundless Taoist arts?" Fu Nanhua nodded, delighted. "Then you and I can be considered half-fellow Taoists already." From the corner of his eye, Song Jixin glanced at the neighboring courtyard gate. He seemed distracted, strangely so given the situation. Fu Nanhua continued, "I'll be direct. Whatever you possess, as long as you're willing to name a price, I'll sell everything I have if that's what it takes to buy it." Songjin looked puzzled. "I can tell that between you and that woman, your family background and status are a level above hers. If she can treat the fellow next door like that, why are you willing to treat me so?" Fu Nanhua supplied the words for him. "As an equal?" Song Jixin nodded approvingly. "You understand quickly. Talking to you is easy." Fu Nanhua did not mind the boy looking down on him, whether literally from the wall or through the arrogance in his tone. Unlike Cai Jinjian, who regarded the straw-sandaled boy as a lowly ant, Fu Nanhua instinctively felt close to Song Jixin. More importantly, he had always carried an inexplicable reverence toward this Mud Bottle Alley. Thus he truly did regard the boy before him as someone walking the same road. The farther one traveled along the Great Tao, the less meaning remained in noble birth or humble origin, man or woman, old or young. In the end, such distinctions were little more than empty illusions. Song Jixin jumped down from the wall and said softly, "Let's talk inside." Fu Nanhua nodded. "All right." As Song Jixin stepped through the doorway, he asked casually, "Just curious, what exactly is your relationship with that well-raised looking big sister?" Fu Nanhua answered without hesitation, "For now we're on the same side, but we're not the same kind of people." "Oh?" Song Jixin gave a vague response, then said something rather difficult to interpret. "Then the two of you are far too indecisive, not straightforward at all. I used to hear that the outside world is filled with immortals, demons, ghosts, and all sorts of strange things. But if cultivators have a grudge, aren't they supposed to pull up the grass by the roots and eliminate every future threat?" Fu Nanhua was, after all, the eldest son of an immortal clan raised in Old Dragon City. He had seen his share of storms. Hearing such words, not a trace of emotion appeared on his face. He merely smiled and asked, "Is there bad blood between you two?" Song Jixin widened his eyes in exaggerated surprise. "What are you talking about?" Seeing that Fu Nanhua plainly did not believe him, Song Jixin let the theatrical expression fade from his face. He sat down first in the main hall, gestured for Fu Nanhua to sit as well, then spoke with apparent sincerity. "Chen Ping'an next door and I both lost our parents when we were young. We've been neighbors for years and have never once quarreled. Believe it or not, that's up to you." Fu Nanhua instantly understood the meaning hidden beneath the boy's words. The boy next door had no backing, a rootless duckweed drifting on the water. If he died, he died. No one would pursue the matter. The young lord of Old Dragon City did not know whether to laugh or cry. Only now did he realize how absurd the little storm in this alley had become. The poor boy next door had brought disaster upon himself merely because he deliberately concealed the address of Song Jixin and his maid. That single act might cost him his life. And now, almost immediately afterward, this well-born Song boy seemed to be borrowing another man's blade to finish him off. One blade was not enough, so he would send another. Fu Nanhua could not help feeling deeply impressed. No wonder an old classic contained the line, "Even before a tiger cub's markings have fully formed, it already possesses the spirit to devour an ox." In Gukan's courtyard, the boy had already been locked inside by his mother. The woman sat facing the old man who called himself a true lord. The old man withdrew the strange patterns that had appeared across his palm, folded his hands, and smiled. "The overall situation is settled." The woman asked hesitantly, "Immortal Master, may I ask what you did just now? Was it enough to make Chen Ping'an?" Before she could finish, she saw a sharp glint flash through the old man's eyes and immediately fell silent. The old man looked toward the courtyard gate and gave a light sweep of his sleeve. A clear breeze rose out of nowhere and circled the small courtyard, lingering without dispersing. Only then did he speak. "For someone of my standing, becoming involved with this place is like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river. I am not yet unable to protect myself, but the longer I remain, the more, as that boy Song Jik has put it, the more entangled everything becomes. In the end, one is covered head to toe in karma. Fortunately, that person has already incurred the resentment of heaven and men. Even after taking a great step back, his integrity can no longer be preserved, and calamity will be difficult to escape. A pity. He once had a chance to enjoy incense offerings for 1,000 autumns. Yet the situation suddenly collapsed into something utterly miserable. Only because of this do I have the opportunity to make a few arrangements for your son, to see whether that boy's life can be ended, and whether the trail can be severed so that some saint or immortal master cannot trace the matter back later and settle accounts after autumn. Then my newly accepted disciple may climb the immortal path, ride the wind and thunder, and one day transform into a dragon." The woman sat rigidly to one side, drenched in sweat as she listened. The old man smiled. "Do you find it strange? Men who dine on rosy clouds and drink the morning dew, who claim to stand apart from worldly affairs, cultivate the Tao with single-minded devotion for centuries, yet in the end, all they seem to cultivate is a murderous temper. Not much better than an ignorant village woman such as yourself, is it?" She hurriedly lowered her head, voice trembling. "I would never dare think such a thing." The old man only smiled and waited in silence for Cai Jinjian of Xianxia mountain to knock on the door. On the road of cultivation, arts were boundless and divine abilities endless. But principles could be great or small, and Taos could stand high or low. Cai Jinjian looked upon mortals as ants. Did this true lord not also look upon Cai Jinjian and Fu Nanhua as ants? Who reasoned with ants beneath their feet? A middle-aged Confucian scholar with graying temples left the village school with a young man in a green robe and walked beneath the towering memorial archway. The most learned teacher in the town looked somewhat weary. He raised a hand and pointed to the plaque above them. "Yield not in the face of benevolence." How do you interpret those 4 characters? Zhao Yao, both his student and attendant, followed his teacher's gaze upward and answered without hesitation. "Our Confucian teaching is founded upon benevolence. The phrase means that while a student should respect his teacher and honor the way, when faced with matters of righteousness and benevolence, he need not yield even to his teacher." Master Qi asked, "Need not yield? What if I changed need not to must not?" Zhao Yao had an honest, clean-cut face, yet his presence was forceful. His talent showed even more openly than Song Jixin's, though his temperament was gentler and more restrained, like a lotus just beginning to bloom. When his teacher posed a question that clearly concealed deeper meaning, he did not dare answer lightly. He lowered his head and thought carefully, assuming this was another test of his learning. The middle-aged scholar saw how tense his student had become, as though facing a mortal enemy, and smiled. He patted the boy's shoulder. "It was only a casual question. Don't be so nervous. It seems I restrained your natural temperament too much in the past and taught you too rigidly. I made you live like one of the statues in the Wenchang Pavilion, forever frowning, speaking of rules wherever you go, reasoning about principles in everything you do. Even if you are not tired, everyone around you will be. Still, judging by the current situation, perhaps that has turned out to be a good thing. Zhao Yao looked puzzled. His teacher led him onward and again looked up toward another plaque. For some reason, the scholar seemed more relaxed now, and as he chose his words, he began telling his student a number of curious old anecdotes. The man who wrote the 4 characters "Yield not in the face of benevolence" was once regarded as the greatest calligrapher of his age. Even now, people still argue over him, over structure and spirit, over whether strength of bone mattered more than divine intent, over the merits of ancient simplicity against modern elegance. There has never been a final verdict. Calligraphy speaks of rhythm, method, intent, and bearing. Across 1,000 years, that man stood at the very summit in 2 of the 4. He left almost no road for the masters of his generation to walk. As for the plaque rare words, natural truth, that one is even more interesting. If you look carefully, you should notice that the brushwork, structure, and spirit of all 4 characters appear similar. Yet in truth, each character was written by a different great perfected one, from one of Taoism's ancestral courts. 2 of those old immortals even exchanged letters and argued for a long time because both wanted to write the mysterious character for rare, while neither wanted to be stuck with the vulgar character for words. Then the scholar brought Zhao Yao beneath the plaque that read, "Seek not outside yourself." He looked around, eyes distant. Originally, the village school where you studied would soon have been closed once there was no longer a teacher. The great clans might have shut it down, or simply demolished it and built a roadside shrine in its place, perhaps erecting a Buddha statue for pilgrims to offer incense to. A Taoist or a monk would preside over it and maintain the arrangement until the end of a full 60-year cycle. During that time, the person in charge would be replaced 2 or 3 times to keep the townspeople from becoming suspicious. In truth, it would be nothing more than a crude trick to deceive mortal eyes. Yet performing a great art here, if the same thing were done outside this town, the commotion might resemble celestial gods beating drums hard enough to shake heaven and earth. By the end, his voice had dropped to little more than the buzzing of a mosquito. Even when Zhao Yao strained his ears, he could no longer make out the words. Jingchun sighed, his voice touched with helplessness and fatigue. Many matters are secrets of heaven that should never be revealed. At this stage, saying a little more matters less than it once did. Still, we are scholars, we must preserve some dignity. And if I, Jingchun, were the first to break the rules, I would be no different from a man who knows the law yet deliberately violates it. That would truly be an ugly sight. Zhao Yao suddenly gathered his courage. Master, this student knows that you are no ordinary man, and this town is no ordinary place. The scholar smiled with interest. Oh? Then tell me why. Zhao Yao pointed at the magnificent archway before them. This place, Iron Lock Well and Apricot Blossom Alley, the old locust tree by the covered bridge, the peach trees in Peach Leaf Alley, the 2 iron swords by Rumor Bridge, Fortune Street, where my Zhao family lives, even the grain rain couplets and double ninth couplets pasted up every year. All of them are strange. The scholar interrupted him. Strange? In what way? You were born and raised here and have never truly traveled beyond this town. Have you seen enough of the outside world to compare? If you have nothing to compare them with, how can you know what is strange? Zhao Yao answered solemnly. I memorized master's books long ago. The peach blossoms described in those poems are very different from the blossoms in Peach Leaf Alley, and master only teaches us 3 elementary texts, placing great importance on literacy. After we finish those primers, what are we supposed to read next? Why do we read at all? What of the examinations mentioned in the books? What does it mean when they say, in the morning a farmer in the fields, by evening a minister in the Son of Heaven's hall? And what? Of the Son of Heaven treasures men of talent. Through the written word he teaches all beneath him. The 2 kiln supervisors who came before never discussed the court, the capital, or the world beyond with anyone but. The scholar smiled with satisfaction. Enough, more words will bring no benefit. Zhao Yao immediately fell silent. Jingchun spoke softly. Zhao Yao, from now on you must be cautious in both speech and action. Remember that calamity often enters through the mouth. That is why Confucian worthies so often guard their lips as though guarding a sealed jar. Gentlemen above the level of ordinary worthies speak with even greater care. They know themselves and know others, forever wary of a careless mistake. As for saints such as the 72 mountain masters of the academies, those people can be compared to the great perfected ones of Taoism, or the golden-bodied arhats of Buddhism. A single sentence from them can become prophecy. Their words may shape reality itself. Those figures, together with the great masters of the 100 schools, are often collectively called terrestrial immortals once they reach that realm. At that point, one might say they have finally set one foot through the true gate. But men like that are each dragons among men. They stand far above ordinary people, like divine statues in Taoist temples and Buddhist monasteries high beyond reach. Some appear only in fragments, the head of the dragon seen while the tail remains hidden. Ordinary people could search a lifetime and never find them. Zhao Yao listened in a haze, as though clouds and mist had swallowed him whole. At last he could not help asking, "Master, why are you telling me all this today?" The scholar's expression became calm and open. He smiled. "You have a teacher, so naturally I have one as well. And my own teacher, never mind, there is no need to speak of him now. I once believed I could continue dragging out this life for several more decades. Then I suddenly discovered that certain people behind the scenes are unwilling to wait even that long. Because of that, I will not be able to take you away from this town myself. You must leave on your own. I have revealed a few things to you that do not affect the greater truth. Treat them as nothing more than a story. I only hope you remember one principle. Beyond the heavens are greater heavens, and above every man stands another. No matter how favored by heaven you may be, Zhao Yao, no matter how great your fortune, never become so pleased with yourself that you grow careless or lazy." The water in the well was falling. Locust leaves were leaving their branches. Both were omens. Jingchun reminded him, "Zhao Yao, do you remember the locust leaf I told you to keep?" The boy nodded vigorously. "I stored it with the seal master gave me." Where in this world does a leaf fall from its branch yet remain so green, moist, fresh, and soft? Of the several thousand people in this town, those who have received what might be called sheltered fortune can be counted on one hand. That locust leaf may look like nothing more than an object to admire, but one day it may become an opportunity of its own. The scholar's gaze deepened. "Beyond that, over these past years I have repeatedly told you to do good and form good ties throughout the town. No matter whom you meet, treat them with courtesy and sincerity. In time you will understand the mystery hidden in this. Such things seem trivial, no more than drops of water striking stone. Yet what they accumulate may one day prove no less valuable than holding an entire local gazetteer in your hands." Zhao Yao noticed a small yellow bird perched on a stone beam, chirping from time to time. Jingchun clasped his hands behind his back and raised his head to look at it. His expression turned grave. Zhao Yao could see nothing unusual. Then Jingchun suddenly turned toward Mudbottle Alley and frowned. He sighed softly. "The insects buried through winter have begun to hear the sound of spring and crawl from the earth. Yet guests, while standing beneath the eyes of their host, have begun plotting in secret. Is that not going too far? Do they truly think that by relying on less than half a bowl of water and making a few decisions on their own, they can do whatever they please here?" Zhao Yao asked anxiously. "Master?" The scholar waved a hand to show that the matter had nothing to do with him, and continued leading him toward the final plaque. Then Zhao Yao suddenly stopped. It was as though he had heard the first waking cry of an insect in spring. His eyes went straight ahead, and he stood there dumbfounded. Not far away, beneath the plaque reading "Key Soars to the Dipper and Ox," stood a girl dressed in black. A veil covered her face. Her figure was well-proportioned, neither delicate nor voluptuous. At her waist hung a long sword in a snow-white sheath and a slender saber in a green scabbard. She stood with her arms folded, head raised toward the 4 characters above her. The scholar found the sight amusing and coughed lightly. Zhao Yao remained frozen, completely failing to understand his teacher's reminder of the Confucian rule. Do not look at what propriety forbids. Jingchun smiled knowingly. He did not scold the boy, nor did he cough again and ruin the moment. He simply allowed Zhao Yao to stare foolishly at the girl. She seemed not to have noticed him at all. She was clearly fascinated by the 4 characters above her. Compared with the first 3 plaques, whose writing was upright, dignified, and solemn, the calligraphy here had been written by a single hand and carried an almost willfully unruly spirit. She liked it. Zhao Yao finally snapped out of his daze when his teacher patted him on the shoulder. "Zhao Yao, you should go back to the school and pack your things." The boy flushed red, lowered his head, and followed his teacher away. Only then did the girl slowly loosen the wrist that had been gripping her saber hilt. From some distance away, Jingchun teased, Zhao Yao, I just saved your life." The boy looked shocked. "Master?" Jingchun hesitated before turning serious. "If you see that girl again, take another road." The refined young man in green looked both surprised and faintly disappointed. "Master, why?" Jingchun considered the question, then gave a firm judgment. "Her edge is too sharp. She is destined to be a sword without a sheath." Zhao Yao wanted to speak but stopped himself. The scholar laughed. "Of course, if all you do is secretly like someone, even the Tao ancestor or the Buddha himself could not stop you. Our own most sage first teacher established countless rules, yet even he only taught Speak not, look not, listen not, and act not where propriety forbids. He never said you were forbidden to think. At that exact moment, as if possessed by a demon, Zhao Yao suddenly blurted out loudly, "She smells really good." The words left his mouth. The boy froze. Jingchun's head began to ache. He was not angry. The situation had simply become troublesome. "Zhao Yao, turn around." The boy obeyed instinctively and turned his back to his teacher. Beneath the archway, the girl turned her head. Killing intent surged into the sky. First, she lowered both arms. Her thumbs settled against the hilts of sword and saber. Then she began to walk. After 4 or 5 small steps, her limbs suddenly erupted with force. The 3-foot sword slid from its snow-white sheath. The slim blade flashed free of its green scabbard. Both weapons left their sheaths ahead of her body, and in the same instant she launched herself forward, seized sword and saber in both hands, and struck down without a word. Between the girl in black and the town's teacher, her slender arms drew 2 brilliant arcs through the air. No divine ability, no magical art. Only one thing: speed. Jingchun remained perfectly calm. He showed no intention of evading and merely stamped 1 foot lightly. A ripple spread through the air. In the next instant, the girl's body snapped backward to its original place, while her killing intent only grew stronger. Her sword and saber, which had seemed unstoppable, had struck nothing at all. Worse, she now found herself standing exactly where she had first drawn them. Jingchun smiled. "Not bad, even a lion uses its full strength to hunt a rabbit. Still, let us reason this out. My student did offend you, but surely his offense does not deserve death?" The girl deliberately lowered her voice to sound more mature. She slowly returned her sword to its sheath and shifted into a one-saber stance, pointing the blade directly at the scholar. "What you think is your business. I don't care." She stepped forward. "What I do is my business. Of course, you may try to stop me." She shot forward again. The ground beneath her feet collapsed into 2 shallow pits. Jingchun placed one hand behind his back and held the other in a loose fist before his abdomen. Among the martial ways of the military school, speed breaks all things. Unfortunately, inside this little square of heaven and earth, even if the formation is nearing collapse, so long as it has not yet fallen, 10 terrestrial immortals joining hands would still be nothing more than ants trying to shake an ancient tree. What then? Can you do? The next moment, the girl inexplicably appeared 10 paces to the scholar's left once again. She seemed to be thinking. Her eyes closed. Jingchun shook his head with a smile. "It is not an illusion technique. This small world is somewhat similar to what Buddhists call a minor universe. Within it, I am..." He stopped, surprise flashing across his face. In an instant, he appeared beside the girl and looked down at her, 2 fingers lightly pinching the tip of her saber. "Who taught you your saber and sword techniques?" The girl did not open her eyes. Her left hand seized the hilt of the sword she had just sheathed, and a cold streak of light swept horizontally toward the scholar's waist, intending to cut him in 2. Still holding the saber tip between 2 fingers, Jingchun shouted softly, "Back!" A deep boom rang through the ground. Dust exploded into the air. When it cleared, the veiled girl stood with 1 foot ahead of the other. A long crack had appeared in the earth between her and the scholar, as though the ground itself had been torn apart. Both her hands were mangled and bleeding. Sword drawn. Saber drawn. Yet she had been reduced to having 1 weapon taken from her barehanded, and she understood perfectly well that her opponent's advantage did not come only from this small world. Even if cultivation and realm were compared directly, he still suppressed her completely. Her technique was inferior. Her cultivation was even further behind. She stood on the edge of erupting into murderous violence. Perhaps even the girl herself did not realize it, but the light around her had begun to distort. Jingchun was, in the end, a man who believed in reasoning. He kindly advised her, "For now, it would be best not to compare yourself with me. It may damage your martial heart. On the martial path, advancing 1 step at a time is of the utmost importance." His posture was rather strange. One hand still held the tip of her saber, while the other rested across the body of her sword. Then he suddenly smiled and imitated her earlier tone. "Whether you listen is your freedom. Whether I say it is my business." The girl was silent for a moment before saying in a low voice, "I have learned from you." Jingchun nodded with a smile. Good. She was not some arrogant, domineering young woman unable to recognize defeat. He tossed the saber back to her. "I'll return this first." Then he lowered his gaze to the sword balanced across his fingers and felt a slight stir in his heart. The young phoenix was already challenging the old. With a trace of regret, he said, "This sword is made of excellent material, but it still falls somewhat short of the very finest. At most, it can barely bear the weight of 2 of those 4 characters. Otherwise, with your aptitude and foundation, even if all 4 were too much, 3 would certainly have been within reach." As he sighed, he casually raised a hand and spoke a command. Edict. 2 dazzling streams of light shot from the plaque bearing the words "Key Soars to the Dipper and Ox." Jingchun swept his sleeve twice and drew both rays into the sword. On the plaque, the characters for Qi and Ox retained their former majesty, but the characters for Soars and Dipper now resembled old men on their deathbeds after one final flare of returning light, their vitality and spirit completely exhausted. Jingchun flicked his wrist. The sword instantly returned to its owner's sheath. Because it was already sheathed, no one could see that two great currents of qi were now racing along the blade like flood dragons. What happened next shocked even Jingchun, who had seen countless strange things in his life. The girl slowly removed the sword from her waist and flung it away. The entire sheathed weapon stabbed into the ground. Then she removed her veil. Determination filled her eyes. That is not the sword Dao I seek. Jingchun stared at the abandoned sword. Deep inside, he felt a heaviness he had not experienced in many years. He asked a question that almost seemed beneath his status. Do you know who I am? The girl nodded, then shook her head. I heard that every 60 years, a saint from one of the three teachings is replaced here to preside over the operation of a great formation. This has continued for thousands of years. People who leave this place often depart either carrying rare treasures or with their cultivation suddenly advanced. That is why I came to see it for myself. When I met you, I confirmed what you were, otherwise I would not have attacked so directly. Jingchun asked, then do you know what you just threw away? The girl said nothing. Inside the sheath planted in the ground, the sword trembled without cease, like a peerless beauty, sobbing in grief and begging a lover to turn back. Zhao Yao had long since secretly turned his head again, and was carefully watching the girl from afar. Even with all his learning, Jingchun could not understand her decision. Nor could he force a sword carrying such tremendous fortune upon someone who refused it. In the end, he could only warn her. Young lady, you would do well to take the sword back. This town is about to become very unsettled. An extra means of protecting yourself is never a bad thing. The girl said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. She still refused the sword. Jingchun sighed helplessly and swept his sleeve. The sheathed sword flew upward and lodged atop one of the high stone pillars of the archway. If anyone tried to pull it free by force, it would inevitably disturb him at the center of the formation. Just as the storyteller's two secret moves, one the previous night and one that morning, had failed to escape his distant notice. Jingchun personally escorted Zhao Yao from the school all the way to the Zhao family's great residence on Fortune Street. The scholar walked slowly. With nearly every step, hidden within the luxuriant courtyards and grand homes lining both sides of the road, faint glimmers of unusual gazes appeared and vanished in an instant. Jingchun murmured to himself, strange, where did that little girl come from? She doesn't seem to be an outer disciple of any immortal sect in this continent. When he returned to the school, a jade tablet rested before his desk. It was roughly 1 foot and 2 inches long. The four corners were carved with the four sacred mountains that stabilized the four directions, while the front was densely engraved with more than 100 seal script characters. According to Confucian ritual law, such a jade tablet should have been held only by the son of heaven of a nation. That alone showed the extraordinary importance of this small town. Turning the tablet over revealed only 2 characters on its reverse. The calligraphy was precise and disciplined, yet possessed a spirit utterly its own. Its bones were immensely strong. Its intent seemed to stretch without end. A secret letter received not long ago also lay on the desk. The scholar with graying temples stared at it, his eyes reddening. Teacher, your student is useless. I can only stand here and watch as you are humiliated to such an extent. Jingchun looked out the window. There was little joy or grief on his face, only a deep loneliness. I, Jingchun, have failed my teacher. After clinging to life for 100 years, all I still owe is death. When Song Jixin brought an object out of the room and placed it on the table, Fu Nanhua could not hide the wild delight on his face no matter how hard he tried. It was an unremarkable little teapot, inscribed with 2 characters, Mountain Fiend. Song Jixin planted both hands on the table, leaned forward and asked with a smile, how much is this worth? The young lord of Old Dragon City reluctantly tore his gaze away from the teapot and looked up. If you sold it in an ordinary mortal dynasty, it would not be worth even a single tael of silver. But if you entrusted it to me, it could buy you an entire city. Songs asked, a city of how many tens of thousands? Fu Nanhua raised 3 fingers. Song Jixin gave an O and curled his lip. So, 300,000 people. Fu Nanhua froze, then burst out laughing. He had assumed Song Jixin would say 30,000. Over in Apricot Blossom Alley, a simple-looking man was crouched beside Iron Lock Well, staring fixedly at the heavy iron chain locked around its stone base. He looked as though he were seriously considering how to carry the entire thing away. Sighs, the black-clad girl wandered through the town without any particular destination. Her bearing was cold and severe. By now, she carried only the saber in its green scabbard, while 2 of her fingers had been crudely bandaged. She had just entered an unfamiliar alley when something cut through the air with a sharp whistle and stopped behind her left shoulder, humming softly. The girl frowned without turning her head. "Get lost." Another whistle. The hilt of the flying sword, which had slipped from its sheath and chased after her, seemed genuinely frightened and fled back the way it had come. The girl was arrogant. The flying sword was obedient. She continued deeper into the alley. Here and there, households had hung festive lanterns outside their doors. Unlike the other outsiders who had entered the town with families, retainers, and elaborate arrangements behind them, the veiled girl had no grand clan procession and no visible web of connections. She had simply come alone. Not far ahead stood a youth in brocade robes. He held a green jade seal in both hands, no larger than his palm. Coiled dragons had been carved across its surface, and beneath the sunlight it shone brilliantly. Threads of faint light seemed to move within the jade itself. The brocade-clad youth raised the seal and narrowed his eyes at the treasure with open delight. Beside him, a tall old man knelt on one knee, carefully wiping mud from the youth's shoes with his sleeve. The young noble had noticed the strange girl long ago. Her veil was plain, her green scabbarded saber unremarkable, yet her footsteps were steady and disciplined. She was obviously not a local. He did not care. His attention remained fixed on the 1,000-year-old jade seal. In fact, deep down he almost hoped the girl would become greedy and try to steal it. Otherwise, this trip was becoming rather dull. He had already obtained 2 treasures, a harvest far richer than expected. If nothing else happened, all that remained was to leave with his old servant. To the youth, that felt strangely incomplete. Still, it was better than the residence outside town, where he had been forced to wear a golden ceremonial robe, embroidered with 9 pythons splendid enough, except that every python was forever missing the final claw that would have made it a dragon. Every chosen visitor who entered this town had to bring 3 tokens, each placed inside a separate brocade pouch. One pouch had already been handed to the gatekeeper as the price of entry. It did not matter how humble the gatekeeper appeared or how decrepit the gate itself was. Even the ruler of a nation or the founding patriarch of a great sect had to obey the rule and pay. The remaining 2 pouches represented permission to take at most 2 treasures out of the town. If someone sees 10 treasures here, or 100, every item beyond those 2 would eventually have to be returned. The tokens inside the pouches were 3 unusual kinds of coin. Warding coins used by common folk during festivals, spring-welcoming coins hung from peach talismans in imperial palaces, and spirit-nurturing coins sealed inside the palms of city god statues. They were called coins, but their true material was an extraordinarily rare refined gold essence. To ordinary mortals living below the mountain, even official silver was not something most saw often. A heavy pouch of what appeared to be pure gold was more than enough to make people willingly bring out heirlooms and offer them for sale. The brocade-clad youth had studied these 3 types of coin all the way here. None appeared in official histories, and he still could not understand their deeper mystery. Ahead, the veiled girl walked straight toward him, her entire body giving off a cold, sharp air. She treated the master and servant in the alley as though they did not exist. The youth changed his mind at the last moment. He put away the jade seal, slipped it into a prepared pouch at his waist, yet remained standing in the center of the alley without any intention of moving aside. The tall, pale-skinned old man rose as well. His voice was soft and slightly feminine. "Your Highness, this girl's steps belong to someone trained in martial arts. She should not be underestimated. Outside the town, there would be little need to care. But here, even those of us who walk the pure martial path of flesh and strength are constantly suppressed by this world. The moment we circulate our chi at full force and open the acupoints, it feels like rivers and seas flowing backward. Chi floods the meridians and acupoints, and once it loses control, the damage cannot be reversed. If this old servant dies, that is a small matter. Your Highness's safety is what matters. If our poor protection were to damage the great cultivation path entrusted to your Highness for generations to come, how could we possibly face His Majesty and Her Majesty after returning?" The youth laughed teasingly. "Grandpa Wu, you've become terribly talkative since leaving the palace. Back there, you could go an entire year repeating the same few sentences. You spoke less than the parrot I raised myself." The old man referred to himself with the humble language of a court servant, his posture almost ingrained with submission. With his entire mind centered on protecting his master, there was little doubt he was a loyal palace eunuch. Seeing that the young prince had not fully understood his warning, the old man spoke more plainly. "Your Highness, the person in this alley is capable of posing a genuine threat to you." The youth smiled lazily. "I've heard that the cultivation world is filled with every kind of person-orthodox schools, crooked sects, demons, heterodox wanderers. But she and I are strangers meeting by chance. Would she really become greedy, kill me, and steal my treasure? That seems unlikely. If everyone on the mountain behaved like that, Wouldn't the whole world have fallen into chaos long ago? The old man sighed. Dynasties beneath the mountain and immortal sects upon it might appear to coexist peacefully, but in truth their relationship was more like two rivers that refused to mix. The youth finally shook his head. Fine, fine. Blaming a young girl for something that hasn't happened is hardly the conduct of a proper man. By then the girl had reached him, her left hand resting on the hilt of her saber. The young prince smiled and turned his body sideways, signaling for her to pass first. The black-clad girl slowed slightly and angled herself as well. Behind the veil, her eyes remained vigilant. The old eunuch noticed the cotton wrappings around her injured hands and frowned. Insolence! His roar erupted like spring thunder. In a single surge he appeared in front of the brocade-clad youth. Leaning backward just enough, he used his body to shove the prince against the alley wall while opening his left hand. A violent impact cracked through his palm. Someone had thrown a stone at the youth's head as a concealed weapon. The force behind it was terrifying enough to punch through a wall. The old man crushed the fist-sized stone in his palm. Yet instead of rushing toward the attacker, his right fist shot toward the girl in black. Her hand tightened around her saber. She fought the instinct to draw it and simply tilted her head aside. The old man's heavy punch missed her by a hair. The wind from his fist instantly whipped her veil into chaos. Without pause, the tall eunuch turned the straight punch into a horizontal sweep aimed at her head. The transition was smooth and seamless. The girl had no choice but to raise both arms at once, crossing them beside her head in a defensive guard. The next instant, the impact sent her sliding more than 10 steps backward. She slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air. Blood seeped through the cloth wrapped around her hands as she reached up and straightened her crooked veil. She was angry now. Turning toward the tall old man, she said in a flat, precise voice, "If that had been anyone else, they would already be dead." The eunuch ignored her. He had survived enough assassinations and ambushes to make his priorities instantly. The girl's danger had already fallen to second place. The greatest threat was the man sitting on a folding stool at the far end of the alley. Apart from the master and servant, there were indeed only two real outsiders here. At the opposite end stood a tall, thin, masked man. His arms were abnormally thick, muscles knotted like iron balls. Two pouches hung from his waist, both filled with round objects. He stood exactly where he was, as though the earlier stone had been nothing more than a greeting. His dark, cold gaze swept across the girl. Then he grinned, licked his lips, and stared at her with burning interest. The girl laughed once. "Come back." The moment the words left her mouth, a sword flew into the alley. The flying sword reached her side and spun rapidly around her like a child trying to curry favor. She snapped, "Get lost." The sword vanished in a flash. The prince and his servant stood stunned. The old eunuch was not shocked by the existence of flying sword techniques. What frightened him from the depths of his heart was the ease with which this girl seemed able to command one. The feeling dragged him back to his youth, to the first days after entering the palace, when he had lived in constant fear and every day watched from afar as a senior eunuch in a bright crimson python robe walked beneath the palace walls. He had not feared the man whose name he never even learned. He had feared that glaring color of blood red. The brocade-clad youth recovered first. He gave a self-mocking smile and stepped forward. "Grandpa Wu, are you all right?" The white-haired eunuch shook his head, expression grave. "Better to remain cautious. If necessary, we can simply." The prince quickly waved him off. "Or perhaps we apologize?" The old man was caught completely off guard. Grief and self-reproach filled his face. When the master is humiliated, the servant dies. All the more when that master belongs to an imperial house. But the young prince was already smiling. "Grandpa Wu, if we do something wrong, what is so difficult about apologizing?" The old man still felt it was improper, but the youth had already begun walking toward the girl. For a moment, the eunuch's thoughts became complicated. The boy truly was not bound by petty formalities. The veiled girl ignored the approaching prince. Her gaze passed over his shoulder, toward the tall eunuch following close behind. "Annoyed," she said. "You tried to kill someone the moment something went wrong. You may have had your reasons, but I still think it was wrong." The youth stopped 7 or 8 paces from her and spoke sincerely. "My name is Gao Zhen. I am from Yiyang Commandery in Great Sui. If Grandpa Wu offended you, I am willing to apologize and compensate you." The tall old man stood behind him with mixed feelings. Saying that Gao Zhen was merely a member of the Gao clan from Yiyang Commandery was, of course, a restrained way of putting it. Great Sui had existed for 1200 years and every ruler upon its dragon throne had borne the surname Gao. The founding emperor himself had risen from Yiyang Commandery. The girl showed little interest in any of that. She tightened her belt with both hands and said to the old man, "If we were outside this town, I would not be a match for a martial grandmaster who may already have reached the realm of riding the wind. But here and now, so long as I borrow that flying sword, you will certainly die." The tall old man sneered. If the masked assassin over there had known your hidden card beforehand, then with his peak minor grandmaster physique, he could simply protect his vital points and let you pierce him 10 times. What would that accomplish? And if even he could do that, what of me, who stands 2 full realms above him, with one of those steps being regarded as a heavenly chasm in martial arts? Little girl, only someone ignorant of true strength would so casually say the words, certainly die. The girl frowned and quietly settled one hand on the saber hilt. I hate trouble, and I dislike arguing even more. Why don't we test it for real, Fall? Whoever wins is the one whose reasoning is correct. What do you think? The old man was not often threatened. His temper flared. If they were anywhere else, then with the girl's present cultivation, no matter how extraordinary her talent, he could crush 10 of her to death with one hand. Even here, if he were not burdened with the task of protecting the young prince, upon whom Great Sui placed such enormous hopes, he would gladly accept the punishment of this world's suppressive laws and suffer severe injuries just to teach this ignorant girl a lesson. A newborn calf might not fear a tiger. That did not mean the tiger would hesitate to eat it. Gao Zhen quickly stepped between them. If the young lady insists on pursuing the matter, then I am willing to offer this as compensation. He lowered his head, opened the pouch at his waist, and took out the jade seal. Holding it in one palm, he presented it to the girl. To show my sincerity, I ask only that you forgive Grandpa Wu's unintended offense. He acted out of loyalty and had no desire to harm you personally. The tall eunuch with white brows and white hair went pale. He dropped to one knee at once. Your Highness, you cannot. This old servant's life is worthless. That jade seal is your Highness's great opportunity, a rare treasure of the mortal world that may even gather the worship of the common people. How can the two be compared? Your Highness is trying to force this old slave to death. The expression on Gao Zhen's face stiffened. The girl seemed to lose patience entirely and gave a mocking laugh. Frogs at the bottom of wells love to think the patch of sky above them is the whole world. Everyone values themselves too highly. Put the jade seal away. There is a saying I happen to like. A gentleman does not seize what another cherishes. She was straightforward by nature. With that, she turned and walked away. Gao Zhen let out a breath of relief. Get up, Grandpa Wu. Kneeling like that looks ridiculous. The 12 great eunuchs of Great Sui kneel only before the emperor. If officials from the 6 offices of remonstrance or the Ministry of Rights saw this, both of us would suffer for it. Besides, this journey has already been completed successfully under the protection of our ancestors. There is no reason to create unnecessary trouble. We should leave quickly, and even after we meet our people outside, we cannot lower our guard. The Yuan and Cao clans are 2 of Great Li's 6 pillar states. Though they stand in opposing factions, both happen to share a blood feud with our Gao clan of Great Sui. If anything happens to you here and your fighting strength is damaged, it will be difficult for me to return safely. The old man nodded and slowly stood. This old servant understands the priorities and urgency of the matter. By the time he spoke the word urgency, the veiled girl had already walked more than 20 paces away. A sudden breeze swept past Gao Zhen, lifting his hair and sleeves. The famous old power of the Great Sui court had never intended to let the girl leave. He was already charging. 3 steps struck the ground like drums, force sinking more than a yard into the earth. On the 4th, the old man launched into the air and brought a fist down toward the girl's back. She twisted at the waist, pivoting on the toes of her left foot as her right hand drew the saber. A snow-white streak of light appeared in the alley, brighter even than the sun. The old eunuch descended like a mountain crushing down from above. His fist smashed directly against the saber's edge. The keen blade cut a line of blood across the back of his hand. The instant his feet touched the ground, he continued forward, driving the girl backward. Then he thrust out a palm that looked slow and unhurried, but moved like lightning toward her forehead. He intended to add enough force to shatter the head hidden beneath the veil. At that instant, he abruptly shifted sideways by a foot. A sharp whistle sounded. He looked down. A sword tip had pierced through the right side of his chest from behind. His expression did not change. 2 fingers closed around the blade, and he pushed backward, forcing the flying sword that had answered the girl's will back out through his own chest. But the interruption had cost him the chance to crush her skull. The girl was blasted backward through the alley. She used the brief opening to breathe, landed like a panther, and vanished into another lane in moments. Gao Zhen's face had turned terrifyingly dark. His fists clenched, anger blazing from him. Chief Seal Eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate Wu Yue, Wu Diaoxi, why did you refuse to understand my hints? Why insist on acting so stubborn? Do you truly believe that inside this little town, you are invincible under heaven? We were plainly the ones at fault. She was not looking for trouble, and she was willing to let the matter end. Why did you still act so viciously? You went too far. The old eunuch withdrew his gaze from the direction in which the girl had fled, then turned and walked back. His back was straight and his chest lifted. Every slow step carried a suffocating pressure, as though he were walking directly across the prince's heart. Gao Zhen, furious that a servant would dare suppress him with such presence, widened his eyes and ground his teeth. Wu Diaoxi of the Imperial Horse Directorate. What you have done is a capital offense, the old eunuch replied calmly. Your Highness, whether this servant lives or dies is for His Majesty to decide personally. In this old slave's eyes, Your Highness's safety weighs heavier than Mount Tai and takes precedence over all else. That girl's presence in this town had already become an immediate danger. If we truly wish for everything to end safely, there was only one solution: kill her. Only if she died could we be at ease. Seeing that the fury in Gao Zhen's eyes could barely be contained, the old eunuch sighed. This servant has served within the imperial palace for more than 60 years. I have seen endless schemes, bloodshed, and unjust deaths. I have very little faith left in the human heart. On journeys protecting the imperial family alone, I have personally resolved more than 30 assassination attempts, large and small. Your Highness, assassins and killers can be far more treacherous than you imagine. Some death-sworn men are completely mad and cannot be reasoned with at all. Take the masked attacker and the veiled girl just now. Gao Zhen thrust a finger toward him. Shut up, you old eunuch! I don't want to hear another word of this nonsense. What I know is that you ruined my chance to recruit her. Even a blind man could see what it means for someone that young to control a flying sword so naturally. That is extraordinary talent. Even among mountain cultivators, she would be a first-rate genius. Forget Great Sui or Great Li across the entire eastern Aquarius continent. Someone like her would be as rare as phoenix feathers and Keelan horns. Give me 10 years to cultivate her, 20 at most, and she could become the greatest assassin in the world, the shadow behind my back. So what if you are a terrestrial immortal? So what if you are a martial grandmaster? And what happened instead? I am Gao Zhen, the future crown prince of Great Sui. I am the master of you, old eunuch Wu. Strangely, the old eunuch, who had weathered countless storms in his lifetime, was not offended by being called an old eunuch. Instead, satisfaction filled his eyes. Only after Gao Zhen had vented all his fury and stood there breathing hard did the old man smile. Your Highness, there are many things you have never experienced personally. Because of that, you do not yet understand how strange the world can be, or how terrifying the human heart. But there is one thing Your Highness did very well just now. You looked very much like His Majesty in his younger days. An awkward silence followed. Once Gao Zhen calmed down, he clearly realized how far he had gone. He had not yet been formally designated Crown Prince, yet he had publicly insulted the Chief Seal Eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, one of the 3 old guardians of the Great Sui Imperial Palace, and a man trusted deeply by both Emperor and Empress. The prince's lips moved as if he wanted to apologize. But the old eunuch smiled first. Your Highness, remember this. Do not casually offer unnecessary apologies to servants. It lowers your own status, and servants will not necessarily be grateful. Even if you feel shame, bury it deep in your heart. The ruler who sits in the 9-5 position is Emperor and Sovereign, a true dragon among men. His mouth carries heaven's decree, Gao Zhen interrupted him. Grandpa Wu, with my current status, it is still far too early to speak of that. Suddenly the old eunuch's entire body tightened. He reacted as though facing a great enemy, pulling the prince behind him with one hand while staring toward the masked assassin's corpse. A slender middle-aged Confucian scholar had appeared at the end of the alley without warning. He walked slowly forward, stopped near the corpse, and crouched down. After removing the dead man's mask, he revealed a bizarre face. No eyebrows, nose cut away, characters branded into the flesh. The man had unquestionably been a convicted criminal while alive. The scholar fell silent. So it had indeed been planned long in advance. This scheme likely had to be traced all the way back to the Confucian temple. Gao Zhen's eyes lit up. He stepped out from behind the eunuch, bent deeply in salute, and only then raised his head to ask respectfully, "May I ask if you are Master Qi of Cliff Academy?" The scholar stood and looked at Gao Zhen. If someone else had not already seized the larger share of this place's opportunities, the two of you would not be leaving so easily today. According to the rules agreed upon by the 4 saints who had governed this place, outsiders fighting one another inside the town were not punished particularly severely, though the consequences could not be called light either. Killing the town's ordinary mortals recklessly would result in immediate expulsion, but conflict between outsiders contained a clear loophole, one deliberately left open so that a person could still repair the fence after losing the sheep. That was why nearly every group traveling with someone like Gao Zhen had brought a helper along. In the worst case, such a person could be pushed forward as a scapegoat. Without that precaution, merely purchasing a place on the list of entrants could consume half the private treasury of the Great Sui Emperor. Half the personal wealth of the sovereign of a great kingdom was an astronomical sum. Who would willingly become a fool who paid that price only to lose everything? Put simply, money was being spent to ward off disaster. Only here, the amount of money required could truly be described as mountains of gold and seas of silver. The phrase throwing away 1,000 pieces of gold used by ordinary townsfolk would be little more than a joke to these people. Realizing he had been ordered to leave, Gao Zhen still asked, Master Qi, if an opportunity arises in the future, would you consider teaching at an academy in Great Sui? Great Sui would be willing to leave the position of imperial preceptor vacant especially for you. The old eunuch thought for a moment and chose not to stop the prince from overstepping. If this scholar could truly be persuaded to advise as the imperial clan one day, the emperor of Great Sui would certainly be overjoyed. Jingchun only smiled and gave no answer. The old eunuch had been decisive and ruthless toward the unknown veiled girl, but facing Jingchun of Cliff Academy, the man who stood here like a divine needle stabilizing the sea, he adopted the exact opposite posture. He lowered his head, cupped his fists, and said, Master Qi, we have disturbed you. Please forgive us. As for attacking a junior just now, this old servant had no choice. I hope Master Qi can understand the difficulties of one who serves the Gao family. Jingchun swept his sleeve. Leave now. Gao Zhen and the old eunuch could only take their leave. Coincidentally, they departed in the same direction the veiled girl had fled. After they had gone some distance, Gao Zhen asked quietly, Is she going to die? The old eunuch shook his head. Not immediately. The flying sword merely allowed her to live a little longer. It changes nothing. The prince hesitated before asking curiously, Grandpa Wu, when did you realize that controlling the flying sword was not actually as effortless for her as she made it look? The old man replied, Too much is as bad as too little. Her cleverness exposed her. Gao Zhen looked confused. As they walked out of the alley, the eunuch explained softly, Let this servant ask your highness a question. After seeing countless luxurious treasures of the mortal world, would ordinary porcelain from this town still interest you? Gao Zhen patted the pouch at his waist and laughed. Of course not. Only something like this jade seal, or a treasure of roughly the same rank, would truly delight me. The old eunuch nodded. Exactly. When that girl used the flying sword to kill, her heart was like still water. She was far too calm, as though she were simply eating or drinking. Yet the moment she realized my true martial cultivation, she immediately abandoned the idea of fighting. More importantly, she feared that I would see through the fact that she was strong on the outside but weak within. So she deliberately provoked us instead. Her real intention was to give both sides a step down. She feared we would develop killing intent and choose to eliminate her rather than risk leaving a future threat. So she tried to break the deadlock first. Of course, the truth proved that she did not handle it particularly well. But for someone so young to think that far ahead is already remarkable. And that makes her even more dangerous. If a tiger like that is allowed to return to the mountains and grow in peace, the threat she may pose to your highness in the future will only become greater. The old man sighed with emotion. Young men and women are often filled with hot blood. If they kill in rage or die in heroic passion, this servant finds nothing surprising in that. But someone who can calmly discipline herself while facing death, or kill another person without the slightest tremor of conscience, that is unusual. A temperament like that must be forged. It has little to do with natural talent or innate aptitude. Whether cultivator or martial artist, many young geniuses die early precisely because their temperament is too obvious. Once trouble comes, that makes them easy to break. Gao Zhen sighed. No matter how you explain it, it's still a pity. The eunuch half joked, Your Highness, if you sigh every time a person of such caliber lives or dies, then once you truly stand atop the mountain, you will be very busy indeed. The prince smiled. I don't believe that. The old eunuch suddenly said, I do not know whether it was an illusion, but this servant sensed that Master Qi's heaven-reaching cultivation may have encountered a serious problem. Gao Zhen did not seem particularly concerned. Our main goal was to obtain the Longmen seal. That alone means the journey was a complete success. I never expected such a priceless imperial seal to be treated as petty change by that Lunwei merchant firm, so naturally we took it the moment we saw it. Speaking of the golden carp, I can't help thinking of that straw-sandaled boy again. The old eunuch smiled. Does your highness intend to find an opportunity to thank him one day? Gao Zhen shook his head. No. I'm mourning the pouch of money I spent. The old man suddenly laughed. Perhaps Great Sui would one day have a frugal emperor after all. A quiet alley ran north to south. The only sound was the creak of wooden wheels. A young Taoist wearing a lotus crown was pushing a cart. He had not opened his fortune-telling stall that day. Instead, he was already thinking about returning to his lodging, packing his belongings, and getting out of town as quickly as possible. The situation had become too tangled. Anyone who stepped into it now was asking to drown. Suddenly, a small black-clad figure stumbled around the bend in the alley. It was the veiled girl. She staggered forward and finally leaned against the wall, inching along it. One hand slipped beneath her veil and clamped over her mouth. The other pointed directly at the young Taoist. The Taoist immediately lowered his head and began muttering to himself. "You can't see me. You can't see me. Supreme Lord Lao, swiftly obey my command. No, forget it. Buddha Prasattvas, please show your mercy." A Taoist faced with disaster was not praying to his own ancestral masters, but begging the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas instead. To say the least, rather improper. Unfortunately, the Buddha and Bodhisattvas appeared unwilling to answer a descendant of another tradition. The veiled girl somehow squeezed out the last scraps of strength in her body and lurched toward him. She collapsed with a thud, yet even unconscious, one hand still managed to seize the Taoist's ankle. The young Taoist clutched his head with both hands, his handsome face twisted into utter despair as he looked toward the heavens. "Such enormous karma falling straight onto my head. Isn't this the same as carving 4 characters on my forehead? Determined to die? For all these years, this poor Taoist has wandered the 4 seas, slept beneath the open sky, crossed mountains and rivers, and been bitten by dogs on the road more times than I can count. Do you know how hard my life has been? Damn you Gao clan of Great Sui, and that old dog surnamed Wu, just you wait. This debt won't be settled even after 500 years. My cultivation is so pitifully shallow. I truly cannot carry a burden this heavy." By now he was babbling incoherently. He looked down at the unconscious girl, nearly in tears. "Young lady, show a little mercy and let go of this poor Taoist, would you? Later I'll find you a beautiful resting place with green mountains, clear water, and excellent feng shui. Your descendants will be blessed for generations." "Ah, no, you're still an unmarried maiden." Then, the girl was completely unconscious. Seeing that no one was around, the young Taoist crouched down and quietly tried to pry open her fingers. Whoosh! A flying sword stopped in midair. Its tip hovered less than 3 inches from the center of his brow. The Taoist immediately released her hand. His expression became solemn and righteous. "Are humans mere grass and trees? How could we lack compassion? This poor Taoist has lived an upright and honorable life. How could I possibly be someone who watches another person die without offering help?" He sat cross-legged beside her, his handsome features scrunched into a miserable knot. "The question is where to take you. That's trouble too." The sword remained 3 inches from his forehead. Then it advanced another inch. The Taoist hurriedly explained, "If you want your master to survive, I need someone else's help. Fine. Go to the old locust tree and bring me 1 leaf. I'll first restore a little of her original vitality. Your master is somewhat unusual. I don't want to save her carelessly and accidentally damage her future cultivation. If that creates another karmic debt, then I really might as well die and be done with it." The flying sword seemed to hesitate. Its tip trembled faintly. The Taoist snapped, "The sooner you go, the sooner your master can take 1 step back from the gates of death. If you're slow, then all of us are finished." The sword vanished in an instant. The Taoist muttered angrily under his breath, "Affection only works when both sides are willing. Then you get a harmonious couple." "Qi Jingchun, oh great Master Qi, look what you've done, randomly matching Mandarin ducks together, and then walking away without cleaning up your own mess." He propped his chin in one hand and used the fingers of the other to calculate. "Let this poor Taoist see. Which household can I bring you to where you can survive without ruining their entire family? Start with the Liu clan." "No, the Liu clan won't do. Their situation is almost the same as the Zhao clan. They already carry opportunities of their own." "What about the Song clan?" The moment those words left his mouth, far away on Fortune Street, every door god image pasted across the Song family's gates instantly lost its vitality and color. Wisps of green smoke, invisible to ordinary eyes, curled upward. Deep inside the estate, a barefoot old man pushed open a door and stormed into the courtyard. He stamped his foot and roared, "Which bastard is plotting against the foundation of my Song clan? Come out and fight me." Back in the alley, the young Taoist coughed awkwardly. "Then perhaps the Liu clan on Fortune Street? Their ancestral incense looks strong. Surely they can withstand this much karma. Let's try." A family plaque passed down by the Liu clan for 1,000 years suddenly exploded with a deafening crack. A horrifying fissure appeared across its surface. A powerful old woman's voice thundered out as a dragon-headed cane slammed against the ground. "Which divine figure is acting in secret? Show yourself." The young Taoist pretended nothing had happened. "What about the Wei clan in Peach Leaf Alley? Your family seems fond of accumulating virtue. Surely you can bear this little burden." Almost immediately, an old man used a secret voice transmission to roar furiously toward the village school. "Qi Jingchun, are you going to deal with this or not? If you can't control it, or if you don't dare, then get out and give the position to Ron Qiang. Let him clean up whoever is sneaking around here. Or is all of this actually you, Qi Jingchun?" Using the situation to settle a private grudge, at the southern bridge beside the stream, A man supervising people digging wells straightened up and moved his lips slightly toward the north. His voice rolled like spring thunder through Fortune Street and Peach Leaf Alley. Enough, do not disrespect Master Qi. And I, Ruan, will absolutely not interfere with the affairs of this town before the spring equinox. For a time, heaven and earth seemed to fall silent, every sound vanished. Meanwhile, the true culprit sat beside his cart in the alley. The flying sword had already returned with a fresh green locust leaf. The Taoist lifted one of the girl's hands and pressed the leaf into her blood-smeared palm. The instant it touched the wound, the leaf melted like snow beneath sunlight and vanished completely. The young Taoist sighed with emotion. Every time I see something like this, the craftsmanship of heaven and earth always makes me feel. He thought for a long moment. No satisfactory words came to mind. At last he lowered his head. A little color had returned to the girl's face. That only made his expression more troubled. Your fate and fortune are tied into things far greater than I expected. Then I can only work in reverse. This town has more than 600 households. Most have deep roots and have enjoyed the aura of this hidden realm for generation after generation. Finding someone with dense fortune wrapped around them would be easy. Finding someone truly poor in fate, however, that's harder than climbing to heaven. It's like walking into the imperial palace and being asked to find an important official. Easy. But if someone asks you to find a beggar inside the imperial palace, where am I supposed to look? The young Taoist suddenly made a small sound of surprise. He had actually found one, a truly unfortunate soul. Instead of feeling relieved, he looked frightened. He closed his eyes and placed a hand over his chest, silently questioning himself. Then he sighed. No matter what, we'll first see what choice you make. This poor Taoist will not force you. If you refuse, then I will shoulder this karmic debt myself. Finally, he imitated a Buddhist monk and pressed his palms together. Buddha preserve me. Bodhisattvas, please show yourselves. Please let this poor Taoist survive this calamity. See in Mud Bottle Alley, the young Taoist bent over his two-wheeled cart and pushed it to the entrance of a small courtyard. He knocked on the gate. Is Chen Ping'an home? Wedged into one corner of the cart lay a long sword in a snow-white sheath. The flying sword inside trembled faintly, as though deeply dissatisfied that the Taoist had chosen someone this down and out to help. The young Taoist had already prepared a whole collection of answers for the inevitable question, "Who are you?" But to his surprise, the door opened almost at once. Chen Ping'an skipped that question entirely. Mud Bottle Alley was the narrowest and most cramped lane in the entire town. The cart could not simply be left outside blocking the road. Fortunately, although Chen Ping'an looked thin as a stick, his actual strength was considerable. He helped the young Taoist lift and maneuver the rather heavy cart into the courtyard without much effort. From beginning to end, the boy asked nothing more. That made the Taoist feel unexpectedly awkward after closing the gate. It was like a shameless man arriving at someone's home to borrow money, only to be welcomed with fine tea, good wine, and a table full of meat. Anyone with even a trace of conscience left would find it difficult to open his mouth and make the request. The young Taoist decided that since things had already become awkward, he might as well be direct. He pulled back the padded quilt covering the cart. Beneath it lay the black-clad girl, curled on her side. Her veil had twisted out of shape but stubbornly remained in place, still hiding her face. The moment the quilt was lifted, a thick smell of blood surged into the air. Only then did Chen Ping'an notice that dark patches of fresh blood had seeped through her clothing. The boy did not stop to wonder how such a small quilt could have completely hidden so strong a smell. He simply stepped back several paces and asked, "Taoist master, what are you trying to do?" "Save her," the young Taoist said immediately. "She's badly injured. No one else in town is willing to take her in." You can't really blame them for sweeping the snow from their own doorstep and minding their own affairs. But after thinking about it again and again, this poor Taoist decided you might be the exception. Chen Ping'an went straight to the heart of the matter. How was she injured? Without the slightest change in expression, the Taoist lied smoothly. "Earlier, this poor Taoist was pushing the cart past the memorial archway when I saw this young lady climbing up to make a rubbing of the plaque that reads Key Sores to the Dipper and Ox. She had paper, brushes, and all sorts of things with her. As for making rubbings, well, it's a kind of copying. Scholars who have eaten too much and have nothing better to do like such things. Difficult to explain quickly. Anyway, she climbed up there and crouched on the beam with her head down. The sight nearly stopped this poor Taoist's heart. I had to stop and warn her to be careful. Who would have guessed she was so absorbed that she slipped and fell? And you know the ground beneath the archway isn't soft mud like Mud Bottle Alley. It's almost as hard as the paving stones on Fortune Street. With a fall like that, her internal organs were probably badly injured. This poor Taoist is a man of religion. Compassion and mercy are part of the path. I couldn't just ignore her, could I? I pushed her from house to house on the way here, but everyone thought all that blood was unlucky. The new year has only just passed. Who would want someone in that condition carried across their threshold? I understand. That's human nature. So I truly had nowhere else to go and finally came to you. To put it unpleasantly, if even you refuse to let her stay, this poor Taoist is not some immortal who can drag a person back from the gates of death. All I can do is wait for her final breath, find a decent place, dig a grave, set up a marker, and call it done. He deliberately spoke extremely fast, slurring some words and muddling others, obviously hoping to confuse the boy long enough to get past the first obstacle. The beginning of everything was the hardest part. Once the first step succeeded, he could deal with each new problem as it appeared. Heaven never sealed every road. There was always hope. Chen Ping'an looked at the Taoist's expectant face, then at the unconscious girl. A complicated struggle passed through his eyes. Finally, he nodded. How do we save her? The young Taoist immediately brightened. Good. With those words from you, Chen Ping'an, we're already halfway there. Don't let the injuries frighten you. She looks as though the King of Hell is already reading her name from the Book of Life and Death, but it isn't quite as hopeless as you think. Of course, what this poor Taoist said earlier wasn't entirely false. There are many mysteries involved. For example, this girl's will to live is extremely strong. Also, she seems to carry some inherited methods capable of protecting her heart and inner chamber. And then there's this town itself. It's a very interesting place. There are many strange things here. Some can be eaten, some can be captured. Many are extraordinarily beneficial. The young Taoist suddenly came back to his senses and realized he had said far too much. He gave an awkward laugh. In any case, you don't understand any of that, right? Chen Ping'an answered seriously. I don't understand it, but I remember most of it. The Taoist blinked. So when you heard the knock and my voice from inside the house, you already knew it was this poor Taoist? Chen Ping'an hesitated before nodding. Yes. The Taoist became curious. You have a good memory? How good? Chen Ping'an glanced at the dying girl. The Taoist smiled reassuringly. Right now, she's in a rather difficult-to-explain state. Her body shouldn't be moved around carelessly. Better to wait a little. Chen Ping'an still looked doubtful. Things I see are easier for me to remember than things people tell me. The Taoist leaned forward. Give me an example. Chen Ping'an thought for a moment. For example, Master Yao at the head of our coiled dragon kiln. His jumping blade technique was the best among all the old masters in town. If I watched him once, I could remember every detail. But, the Taoist smiled and finished for him. But your hands and feet could never keep up with what you remembered, right? Chen Ping'an's eyes lit up. He nodded vigorously. The Taoist smiled knowingly. Then have you ever thought about what was truly powerful about old Yao's skill? Chen Ping'an's expression darkened in thought. For a long time, I couldn't figure it out no matter how much I thought about it. Later, Liu Xianyang told me that old Yao once said the jumping blade technique can only be done at its best when the heart is steady, not merely the hand. After hearing that, I understood a little. I was always too anxious. The more anxious I became, the more chaotic my hands became. The more chaotic they became, the easier it was to make mistakes. I could see very clearly that what I was doing was different from old Yao. And because I could see the difference so clearly, I became even more anxious while doing it. That's why, when we worked the clay and bricks at Coiled Dragon Kiln, I was always the worst. The young Taoist said calmly, there is an old saying, the master leads you through the gate, but cultivation depends on the individual. Yet, if the man who should have been your master never truly intended to lead you through the gate at all, how were you supposed to cultivate? Chen Ping'an shook his head. My hands and feet are clumsy. Forget comparing me with Liu Xianyang even compared with ordinary apprentices, I'm worse. It wasn't strange that old Yao looked down on me. The Taoist suddenly smiled. Chen Ping'an, do you know how difficult it is to truly understand the words, steady heart? It is not something easy to think through. You should not belittle yourself. Chen Ping'an still shook his head. It's like catching fish in the stream. I stand where the water doesn't even reach my knees. I bend down and catch one. Someone else is a strong swimmer. He goes into deep water, dives under, stays beneath the surface for a long time, and finally catches a fish too. But Taoist master, those two people aren't the same, are they? The young Taoist laughed loudly and gave no answer. Then without warning he said, we can save her.